I'm not sure what to make of this experience, but I have heard of other similar accounts. It was about 8:30 p.m. on a Friday night in early August 2014, and my wife and I were driving back from her parents' house in Grand Saline, Texas. We had just turned onto the highway, heading east, when we saw something that neither of us could explain. I was driving the car and noticed 2 red lights ahead of me at about tree level moving across the road. We were surrounded by woods on this part of the road. At first, I thought it might be an airplane coming in for landing at a nearby airport, or possibly even a helicopter, although they didn't blink like normal aircraft lights do. But as we got closer, my wife pointed out that there appeared to be another light trailing behind them, a white-colored light. None of this made sense at all to either of us. My wife grabbed her phone off the dashboard to try to take pictures while still looking out the windshield. As she did so, she shouted, "Oh my God, what is that?" Startled by her sudden reaction, I looked up just as one of these things passed directly over our vehicle. They made no sound whatsoever, which struck me as really concerning considering how close they were to us. I mean, we should have heard something. As soon as it got past where we could see it, our line of sight from the car was blocked by trees for only seconds before opening up gain and allowing us both a clear view of whatever these objects were. And now they were traveling away from us through the treetops toward Lake Tawakoni State Park. At this point, my mind began desperately trying to rationalize what we had seen. Drones, maybe? No way. Those weren't drones. The shape wasn't right, nor did they behave like any drone either of us had ever seen. Plus, they would have been flying well above those trees anyway. Finally reaching a break between trees long enough for me to see one last time before losing sight again, their size became more apparent than ever. We could now see that they were approximately 10 feet wide with 2 red circular lights on the front and a white light on the back. No other lights were visible, no strobes or blinking beacons, just those 3 steady lights. As we drove further down the highway, my wife continued to try taking pictures, but was unable to get anything more than black blobs and fuzzy dots of light in her photos, sort of like when you try to take a picture of the moon and it looks like nothing. After about 10 minutes of driving, I turned onto another road that led us through Lake Tawakoni State Park, where we saw several deer grazing by the side of the road. I slowed down so as not to spook them, and we watched them to see if they gave off any indication that something strange had been going. Like, did they also see the craft? And if so, were they spooked by it? None of them seemed out of sorts, though, so maybe it really was just some kind of normal aircraft? It's worth noting here that there are many reports online from people who claim to have seen similar objects all across America, and even around the world, and many of those witnesses describe them as UFOs. My gut was telling me this wasn't just any aircraft, and my wife, well, she looked like she believed we were smack in the middle of an episode of The X-Files. Neither of us is quick to jump on the alien bandwagon, but you can bet we were both thinking it. The silence in the car was deafening as we both sat with our own thoughts, trying to process what we had just seen. As we continued to drive, the atmosphere felt charged, almost electric. The night was clear, and the stars were out, yet here we were, chasing after lights that didn't behave like anything we recognized. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing on end, and I shot a glance at my wife. She was staring intently out the window, her phone forgotten in her lap. We drove in silence for a few more miles until we reached the main area of the state park. Here, the road opened up, and the tree line receded, giving us a broad view of the sky. We pulled over, the car's engine idling as we looked out. That's when we saw it again. The objects were further away now, but unmistakably the same ones we'd seen before. This time there were 4 lights, not 3, arranged in a rectangular formation. They moved in unison, smooth and steady, then stopped and hovered for a moment before shooting straight up into the night sky and disappearing from sight. At that point, what more could we do? We were 2 regular people who had just seen something extraordinary. We looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between us. We didn't need to speak it out loud. We would tell our friends, sure, but would they believe us? Would anyone? We started the car again and headed home. The rest of the journey passed in contemplative silence. When we got home, we went straight to the computer, looking up anything we could find on unusual aerial sightings in Texas. There were pages and pages of reports, some with descriptions eerily similar to what we had seen. We spent hours reading, watching videos, and finally, as the sky began to turn a soft shade of blue with the approach of dawn, we went to bed, our minds racing with the possibilities of what we had witnessed. That experience has stayed with us, clear as day, even years later. We still talk about it from time to time, wondering what it was we saw that night. We keep an eye on the sky, but whatever it was hasn't returned, at least not that we've seen. But it's changed us, made us more aware that there's a lot out there we don't understand, and maybe, just maybe, we're not meant to. I was around 18 years old when this happened. I am now 70. It was the summer of 71, maybe August or September, and I was up in the California mountains with my friend, who is still alive and will verify what we saw that day. We were camping at a small campground on a mountain river, probably one of many tributaries to the Sacramento River, but I'm not totally sure about that. We were sleeping out under the stars because it was so warm that night, and we needed any breeze we could possibly get. In those days, we didn't worry about bear attacks for some reason, but nowadays they're more common, so people sleep in their tents now for some extra protection. I woke up about dawn because I had to go pee really bad, and there wasn't a proper toilet at this campsite like some others have. Just trees you could hide behind if you needed privacy while doing your business. Well, anyway, I went down near the river where nobody would see me doing my thing, and then noticed something strange across the water moving around near a big rock formation sticking out into the stream, maybe 100 yards away. I'm not sure how far it was exactly, but it wasn't too close or too far away from us. There was a creature over there just meandering around, and the creature seemed very large, huge. Dark brown fur all over its body, with longer hair hanging off its arms like someone wearing long, shaggy sleeves on both sides as it stood hunched over, reaching down into the water, which made waves lapping against his legs. It looked kind of like a monkey, but also human-like, standing upright with both hands, dipping them into shallow rapids, and scooping something out of the creek bed. I froze right where I was watching him, trying not to make any noise because I didn't want him to see me looking at him either. But after several minutes, he turned sideways, bending over and grabbing hold of something laying nearby rocks before walking back towards the tree line. When he moved, he did look kind of ape-like, swaying side to side, swinging arms along with legs in a shuffling motion while wading across shallow water. Once he reached the bank, he bent down, then lifted himself up by pushing off from the rock ledge, standing upright, and now on his feet again, like when I first saw him. I wanted to run back and tell my friend what I'd seen, but I was afraid of making noise and having the creature know I was there, so I stayed put, hiding behind bushes. Then it happened. Another one, just like the first, appeared from out of nowhere, running down the riverbank, splashing through shallows, and following the same path until reaching the other side, where big rocks jutted into the stream too. Now both of these things were walking together, heading deeper into the forest, disappearing among the trees before they vanished completely. My bladder almost burst holding pee inside for so long, but I couldn't move, fearing that these creatures, that I'm now sure were Sasquatches, might see me if I tried relieving myself. Well, eventually I made my way back to the campsite, telling my buddy about what I just saw. Of course, he didn't believe me at first until I mentioned finding footprints left by creatures around the creek bed nearby on my way back. But I didn't want to go back and look to show him because I was too scared. But I agreed to go back once he insisted like crazy. When we got there, we sure enough saw several large prints measuring maybe 15 inches long, spaced apart, showing a huge stride and traveling a far distance, some of them even leading to our campsite. Of course, this made us realize that the Sasquatch had probably been watching us all night. Now, some people say these creatures doesn't exist, or they're only figments of imagination created within minds of those who are losing their marbles. But let me assure you, I did witness 2 separate beings that morning, and we also found their tracks. To me, that is confirming evidence supporting my encounter. My buddy believed me after seeing the tracks, not to mention the look on my face and my jumpiness. Let me tell you that Sasquatch are real, all right? Whether anyone believes this story or not makes no difference to me personally, since I know factually what took place in that mountain valley many years ago. Also, I remember hearing weird sounds late at night, similar to whooping and hollering echoing throughout the woods. In fact, after thinking about it, they even seemed to be coming closer as time passed, eventually probably coming right outside the tent where we slept. I have never heard anything quite like it, nor do I really want to again either. Guess some things best left alone. But honestly, I'm sure you can see how this affected me since it's been over 50 years since the incident occurred. Thanks for letting me share my experience with others interested in knowing more about cryptids lurking around our world. If anyone doubts the authenticity of my account from when I was young, just let me know. It is believed that the Smoky Mountains were created between 200 and 300 million years ago. The mountains are part of the larger Appalachian mountain range, which extends from Canada in the north to Alabama in the south. They are the oldest mountains in North America. The name Smoky is used to refer to the natural fog that is often low-hanging over the mountains, giving them the look of being filled with smoke. Because of the large bear population, the park rangers who work in the Smoky Mountains are very aware of bears and their habits. One of the jobs of a park ranger anywhere is to educate visitors and campers, and to inform them that it is of the utmost importance that they are careful and diligent when they are hiking or camping. Jennifer and her friend Alyssa were visiting the Smoky Mountains for a long weekend in midsummer of 2011. They both worked as elementary school teachers in Roanoke and were looking forward to a few days of hiking and camping along the Blue Ridge Parkway. They were even planning to bring back some souvenirs for their students, along with maps and pictures of the things they saw. Overall, they had planned their trip well and had packed all of the necessary supplies, including bear spray, which they had read on numerous occasions was absolutely necessary. So that morning, Jennifer picked Alyssa up, and they drove the few hours from their homes in South Roanoke, Virginia, to the mountains. The drive was uneventful, and they made it to the park and set up their tents in a campground near one of their favorite trails. The campsite was quiet, and they had the whole place to themselves, which surprised them. Then, once everything was set up and in place, they decided to get straight to it. They immediately changed into their hiking clothes, laced up their boots, and shouldered their packs. They had packed sandwiches and snacks, water bottles, and the bear spray. They were feeling ready for anything, or so they thought. The first day went off without a hitch. They hiked up to one of the overlooks and took in the beautiful scenery. They saw some deer along the trail and got pictures of the view and a few good animal pictures. They talked about how the pictures would never quite catch the beauty of the mountains the way a human eye can see it, and the way they felt being there. Finally, after a long day of hiking, they went back to their campsite and made a campfire and cooked dinner. They were so tired from their hike that they ended up going to bed early. They had cleaned everything up, but it soon became apparent that they had forgotten to take some very important steps to ensure their safety. In the middle of the night, Jennifer was awakened by a noise outside her tent. She slowly unzipped the flap of her tent and quietly peeked her head out. The moon was bright enough for her to see, so she didn't need her flashlight. To her surprise, she saw the image of a large black bear just about 15 feet away from her. facing away from her tent and sniffing and rummaging through their things that they hadn't locked in the car. However, the animal looked emaciated and thin, almost sickly, not the way she would expect a normal, healthy bear to look. And then another detail hit her in the gut. The animal was walking around on its back legs only and sniffing around their campsite, picking things up and smelling them. Jennifer knew that she needed to stay calm and not make any sudden movements. She had read that scaring a bear could provoke an attack, and obviously that wasn't anything she wanted to have happen. Very slowly and carefully, she reached for the bear spray and took it out of the tent pocket just inside the door next to her, where she had put it so that it would be accessible. She had wanted to be absolutely ready if anything had tried to get into their tent. She then slowly backed into the tent and quietly zipped up the flap. She then woke up Alyssa and whispered to her, telling her what was happening. Alyssa was instantly wide awake and terrified, but Jennifer assured her that they would be okay if they just stayed quiet. They both stayed very quiet, huddled down in their sleeping bags and didn't leave the tent until morning. Finally, in the early morning, once the light started showing, they slowly unzipped the flap of the tent and peeked out. They thanked God that the animal was gone, but as they looked around their campsite, they saw that it had overturned their cooler and eaten all of their food. They knew they were now a target, that animals now thought of their campsite as a food source, and they had to get out of there ASAP. They packed up their campsite, threw their remaining water on the campfire, and quickly left the area. When they got back to their car, they saw a park ranger in the parking area and told him about their encounter with what they said looked like a sickly black bear. Jennifer was sure to mention to the ranger how it looked thin and sickly, and how it had been walking around on its hind legs. She asked him if there was such a thing as a rabid bear, or a bear with some kind of disease that could cause this to happen. The ranger's face got very serious, and he told them that they had done the right thing by getting out of there as fast as they could. He told them that there had been reports of something similar happening in other areas of the park, and that they were dealing with a very serious situation. The ranger told them that they were dealing with a werewolf. Jennifer and her friend Alyssa couldn't believe what the ranger had just said. In fact, they were shocked not only at the information, but that the ranger would admit such a thing to them. His telling them was so over the top that they actually didn't know whether to believe him or not. But he was adamant that what they had seen was definitely a werewolf, and that leaving the area had probably saved their lives. He told them that there had been other reports of a similar creature in the area recently, and that they were actively looking into it. He then looked at them intently and asked them not to repeat what he had just said to any other park employee, that he would never admit to telling them what he just did. He explained that he had been instructed to keep the info internal, but he just couldn't, in good conscience, keep the information to himself and not help save visitors. Jennifer and Alyssa thanked the ranger for his warning and continued to their car, where they quickly left the park. They both looked back at the ranger as they drove away, still in disbelief of what he had told them. The ranger's story was so over the top that they had a hard time believing it at first. But as they thought about their encounter with the creature, they realized that the ranger must be telling the truth. They had seen something that wasn't normal, and that the rangers sharing the truth with them had probably saved their lives and the lives of anyone else he told. Since that encounter, Jennifer and Alyssa have done some research on werewolves and have come to believe that they do exist. They have also made it their mission to warn others about the dangers of these creatures. And although they haven't had any personal encounters with werewolves since that fateful night in the park, they remain vigilant and always on the lookout, just in case. I'm a construction worker by trade, but I have a thing for hiking and exploring the wild. That's why I was up on the Applegate Trail in the Northwest last week. It's a tough trail to beat, but nothing out of the ordinary. Well, that was until I saw it. My usual haunt is the Great Smoky Mountains, but this time I decided to head off to explore something different, something more rugged and wild. That's why I chose Applegate. I'd heard a lot about the trail over the years, the challenge it presented, the breathtaking views it offered. But there were also whispers of something else, local legends, stuff about odd happenings and strange sightings. I never put much stock in those stories, but that was before I saw it. I'd set up camp for the night in a clearing near a creek, a quiet spot, perfect for a peaceful night's sleep. Only this time it wasn't quiet at all. In the middle of the night, I was jolted awake by some sort of noise. Sounded like a grunt or a growl, not sure exactly, but it was unusual to say the least. It started subtly, not the usual sounds of the forest at night. No, this was different. It was a low rumble that seemed to shake the ground beneath me. I thought it was an earthquake at first, but the trees remained still. Only the ground beneath me trembled. Then there were scrapes and scratches, like claws on tree bark. I've heard bears in the night before, but this was like no bear I've ever heard. There was a rhythm to it, almost like a pattern, and it was this pattern that added an edge to the already unsettling noises. Along with the strange rumbling and scratching sounds, there was a peculiar odor. It was a smell you never forget once you've experienced it. It hung heavy in the air, clinging to my clothes and my gear. It made me think of something primal, something ancient that didn't belong in our world, yet here it was, and the feeling of being watched grew more intense with every passing minute. I was sure that something was out there, studying me, biding its time. It felt like a predator that was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I know, sounds cliche, but I just couldn't shake it off. I tried to put it off as some animal, but there was something unnatural about the whole thing. And then, as I sat by the dying embers of my fire, I saw it. There, by the edge of the clearing, stood a figure that towered over me, 8 feet tall at least. I froze, my breath hitched in my throat. It stood upright, but moved awkwardly, as if not used to its towering stature. The glow from the dying fire caught its eyes. They were yellow, piercing. The evil in them, it was undeniable. Its eyes, they were like 2 glowing orbs cutting through the darkness, like headlights on a desolate road. There was a cruel sort of intelligence in them, a chilling malice that sent shivers down my spine. It was as if those eyes had seen me, really seen me, and they knew what I feared. It was a horrifyingly surreal moment, one where I realized that this creature wasn't just a mere inhabitant of the wild. It was something more, something uncanny, and I was in its territory. I've seen alligators, and I've seen crocodiles up close in my trips to the Everglades. The facial features on this creature, they were similar, but grossly out of place on a body that stood upright. It was an unnerving sight, I'll tell you that. In a moment that seemed to stretch out for an eternity, we just stared at each other. I didn't dare to move, nor did I dare to breathe. But then it left me. The way it moved was as if it was torn between walking like a man and lumbering like a beast. It crashed through the underbrush, each step causing the ground to shudder under its weight. The trees seemed to part in its path, as though even they were afraid to stand in its way. I remember feeling an overwhelming sense of relief and dread, relief that it was leaving, and dread for the lingering presence it left behind. I didn't sleep a wink that night, and I kept the fire going until the break of dawn. As soon as I could see the trail clearly, I packed up and got the hell out of there. I've been hiking and exploring for decades, but I've never experienced anything like this before. It has left an impact, that's for sure. Every rustle, every grunt I hear in the wild now, it sends a chill down my spine. I guess some things you just can't shake off. I'm still rattled from the experience and find myself looking over my shoulder even in broad daylight. Since that unforgettable encounter, I've become considerably more cautious. I used to be an ardent outdoorsman, always eager for my next adventure, but now the simplest noises or shadows can send my heart racing. I frequently catch myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see those fangs and that demonic face lurking in the most ordinary of places, from grocery store aisles to the trees lining my street. I hardly go into the woods anymore, and when I do, it's never alone, and never without a sense of unease. My sleep is often disrupted by nightmares, replaying the encounter with horrifying accuracy. It's safe to say that this creature, whatever it was, has left a lasting imprint on my life. The first indication that something was wrong was a smell, a putrid mix of wet dog, rotting meat, and a sharp tang of urine that was strong enough to turn your stomach. It was unusual and offensive even by wilderness standards. The smell was so powerful that it seemed to hang heavy in the air, stifling the normal, fresh scent of the forest. It was the first indication that I was not alone, that there was something else there with me. At the time, I thought it might be a dead animal nearby, or maybe some kind of large predator marking its territory. I had no idea just how close to the truth I was. I was on a routine hiking trip in the Smoky Mountains. I've been exploring these trails since I was a kid, but this time, I ventured off the usual paths. The Smoky Mountains have always been my refuge, a place where I can escape from the mundane routine of everyday life. However, on this particular day, I was craving something new, a trail I hadn't beaten down with my frequent visits. This was a part of the forest I had often glanced at but never ventured into. It seemed wilder, denser, more untouched. I thought it would offer a more thrilling experience. Little did I know how much of an adventure it was going to turn out to be. Suddenly, I heard a low, guttural growl from behind. I turned around to come face to face with a creature straight out of a nightmare. It stood upright on what appeared to be human legs, but the similarities ended there. It was at least 8 feet tall, with a big chest, wide shoulders, and a humped back. Its long snout, filled with a double row of teeth and fangs, bore a terrifying grin. The creature's dark brown hair seemed to blend in with the forest, and its pointy ears were eerily dog-like. I was shocked into paralysis. It was almost as if my brain was struggling to accept what my eyes were seeing. The creature looked like something from a horror movie, nothing like the animals that belonged in the Smoky Mountains. All I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the creature's low growl. I couldn't look away from its demonic-looking face and those piercing eyes. It had me in a trance. Part of my mind knew I needed to, but I couldn't get my body to react, to run. Every instinct was screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. I was in the middle of the forest, miles away from any human, and face to face with a creature that seemed to have jumped straight out of my worst nightmares. When it started moving towards me, I backed away slowly, trying not to provoke it. Our eyes locked on each other as I took baby steps, hoping it would let me continue. After a tense standoff, the creature lunged, snapping me out of my paralysis. I turned and sprinted, ignoring the painful thorns and branches scratching my arms and face. My entire focus was on putting as much distance between the creature and myself. I had a rough idea of the direction I needed to head to reach safety, but in my panic, everything looked unfamiliar. My senses were heightened, and every rustle of leaves or snapping twig sent a fresh wave of adrenaline surging through me. The creature's growls followed me, growing louder and seemingly closer with each passing second. Its presence felt like a looming shadow, a relentless predator closing in on its prey. I had to find a way to escape and find refuge and safety. Summoning every ounce of strength and determination, I veered off the beaten path and crashed through the underbrush, pushing through the pain and exhaustion. I stumbled over fallen logs and leaped over hidden obstacles, never losing sight of my goal. Soon I burst into a clearing and relief washed over me. The creature's growls faded into the distance, the meadow now feeling like a sanctuary after the horrors of the forest. I collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air. I took a moment to gather my thoughts and steady my racing heart. It was clear that I needed to find my way back to civilization. I rose to my feet and surveyed my surroundings. With a renewed determination, I set off once more, trusting my instincts to guide me back to the familiar trails of the Smoky Mountains. Hours later, as I emerged into the welcome embrace of civilization, a sense of gratitude and awe washed over me. I had survived an encounter with a creature that defied explanation. Although the memory of that creature's demonic face and piercing eyes would haunt me, it would also serve as a reminder of the strength that lies within us when faced with the most unimaginable of circumstances. The Smoky Mountains had tested me, but I had emerged alive, and for that I am forever grateful.